Hey everyone, welcome to our third Connect group discussion in Term 2 series WWJS. What would Jesus say? And in this series we are looking at some of life's big issues on the screen behind me here. We're looking at them through the lens of what Jesus has to say about them. You know, Jesus spoke for 3 years, he ministered for 3 years on the planet, and yet his words have transcended time. And 2,000 years later, they are as prevalent and as useful to us as they were to those who heard them on the shores of Galilee and in the temple in Jerusalem as Jesus ministered all those years ago. And so we don't need to look at other things, and so often we do. We look for other answers, but I think it's important that we come to Jesus, our Creator who knows us, look to Him, trust Him to help us in our life. And today I want to pick up in this Connect group discussion on the topic of anger. Now, this kind of links, we've already dealt with relationship stuff. We've talked about offense on a Sunday. We talked about taking offense a few weeks back. We've talked about conflict last time in Connect and how we could deal with conflict. And this is kind of along the same lines, dealing with anger, how we treat anger on the inside. Now, this is so slightly different, but it carries many of the same sort of things, because relationship is important. You and I need to contend for relationship at all costs. You see, relationship, healthy relationship, is how the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit exist. They live in complete unity, perfect relationship, completely in unity and in sync with one another. There's never any tension between them. They're in total agreement, and it's because of that that we have a hope that we can have relationship. You and I are created in the image of God, and God said, let us make humankind in our image, Father, Son, and Spirit. In other words, we are created for relationship. We're not created to be alone. But there's a problem. Sin. Sin got into the world and destroyed and mixed up that relationship. And we understand now that we are living as broken human beings who need to learn how to behave from our godly perspective, from the God nature that has been implanted in us as believers of Christ, and learning to not live from the sinful nature that we are called to put to death in our world. And that's why I want to focus on anger, because this is a big deal. And you might immediately identify with it. You might know straight away, that's me, I've got an anger problem. I often talk to people and they know straight away they have an anger problem. If you don't know, ask your spouse, ask someone near to you. They'll tell you whether you've got an anger problem or not. But most times we understand if we have especially if we're prone to kind of outbursts of anger, we'll know that that's an issue in us. It can be explosive and violent, but not always. And this is where the deception of anger comes in. Anger can actually be so well disguised that we don't even realize we've got it. And oftentimes that's because we push the anger inward. Rather than express it outward, we actually push it inward. We actually get angry with ourselves even. We get angry towards God, and we suppress anger, but it has no less destructive force in our life. It can be incredibly destructive, whether it's obvious outward anger or whether it's suppressed inward anger. And so in these next few minutes, I want to look at a couple of passages from the Sermon on the Mount, where actually a lot of these messages we've been doing have come out of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus, in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, spends 3 chapters teaching people about this sort of stuff, everyday life issues. He deals with many of these issues that are on the screen behind me here in this passage, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. So we're going to start with Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 to 26. Jesus says, "You've heard that our ancestors were told, 'You must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment.' But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you're subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you're in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you're in danger of the fires of hell. So if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple and suddenly you remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person. Then come and offer your sacrifice to God. When you're on the way to court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to an officer, and you'll be thrown into prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you've paid the last penny." One of the things that Jesus does is he always raises the bar. So Jesus refers back to the law, which said if you are a murderer, then you'd be put to death. If you are a thief, then you'd suffer a thief. If you're an adulterer, you would be punished as an adulterer. And Jesus elevates that principle from an outward breaking of a law to an inward condition of our heart. And he says, you've heard it was said, don't commit murder. But Jesus takes it further. He lifts the bar from there, because if that was the case, we would, most of us, hopefully all of us, but then hopefully we would say, well, we've never murdered anybody, we've never killed anybody, so we're not a murderer. And we would do what the Pharisees did, which was set our benchmark by our outward behaviour. But Jesus elevates it. He says, look, it's not about whether you've killed somebody. It's about higher than that. If you've ever been angry with somebody, you're already a murderer. You've already got the seed of murder in your heart. He's elevated the bar. And that is so important for us to understand. See, you don't have to have physically killed someone to be a murderer. We're all prone to anger in one form or another. Anger is a problem that began in the Garden of Eden. God came, said, don't eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The devil came, deceived Eve. Adam sinned willfully right beside Eve, and he took some of the fruit and ate of it, and sin entered the world. And then God shows up and he says, Adam, what have you done? And Adam's first words, he's angry with God. He says, that woman you put here with me, I'm not taking any blame, God. I'll blame you. You gave me her. You put her here with me. She's the problem. You're the problem, not me. Adam was angry with God. Then Adam and Eve's sons, Cain and Abel. Cain was angry with Abel. And that was the first murder that we see where there was a death. But murder happened when Cain says to Abel, I'm angry with you. I'm upset with you because I'm upset with God because God's accepted your offering and not mine. Let's go into the field. The moment he determined to say, let's go into the field, he was a murderer. Before he killed Abel, he was already a murderer. It happens all the way. It goes downhill from there. All the way through, we see that murder comes from a decision that begins in the heart. And in that passage we just read, we see that Jesus prioritized unity so much that he says, don't even think that you can have a relationship with me. Don't bring your gift at the altar. Don't come with your spiritual gifts and your offerings to me if you are out of sorts with someone. If you have someone who's got a problem with you, or you know they've got a problem with you and you haven't done enough about it, or you've got a problem with them, he says, don't just come thinking you can bypass that and ignore it and have this relationship. He says, go fix this one, then come back and have this one. So it shows that Jesus is prioritizing the importance of unity. Then a few verses down in Matthew 5, a bit further on, in verse 38, he said, you've heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you're sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. This is one of the most powerful truths that if we can grasp this, it can actually nullify, dissipate the power of anger in your life. When you determine that a person who has wronged you, when you determine that it will not affect you, that you're not going to let it control you, you've already dealt a massive blow to the devil at that point. You've already defeated a lot of the enemy's attacks that he wants to bring at you. He uses anger, offense, all that stuff we've been talking about, disappointment, disillusionment, hurt, pain, grief, where people have hurt you. He will use all of that to sink his claws into you and get a control of you. But when you determine that any wrong that is done to you will not affect you, you actually go, and even more than that, like Jesus says here, actually go out of your way to serve the person who has wronged you, then you've dealt the devil a great blow. Jesus says, hey, someone wants to make you walk 1 mile, don't begrudge them the fact that they've made you walk 1 mile. Go with them a 2nd mile. Go and a Roman soldier had the right to demand that anyone carry his gear for 1 mile. That was the law. They had no way to do it. That's punishable if they didn't do it. And Jesus elevates. He says, don't begrudge the fact that the Romans make you carry their gear 1 mile. He says, go a 2nd mile. Pastor Phil puts it this way. He says there's not many people on the second mile. It's very lonely on the second mile. There's plenty of room on the second mile. If you will have that attitude that says, I'm not going to begrudge the fact that someone has made me go 1 mile. Hey, I'll go a second mile. Hey, you want to strike me on this cheek? Hey, I'm okay with that. You strike me on this cheek too. That is showing that you're willing to serve another person who has wronged you. And I'll tell you, there's tremendous power in that. Now, I'll be the first to say that's not easy to do. If a person hurts us, it's not easy. But my friend, you can do this. Jesus is illustrating something, a powerful key. And if you will commit to this and say, God, help me to be a second mile Christian. When someone drags something up against me and I feel like I'm being compelled to walk 1 mile, Lord, make me a second mile Christian who'll go the extra mile. And you'll be amazed how much power the enemy loses on you, how his claws of control will become released from your life when you do that. Proverbs 15 verse 1, a famous proverb, says, a gentle answer deflects anger, but harsh words make tempers flare. Same principle as what Jesus was saying. A gentle answer. If someone is angry with you, a soft answer, and it says in other versions, a soft answer turns away wrath. A gentle answer deflects anger. If we can learn to be soft and gracious when people are wronging us, doing the wrong thing to us, then we will deflect anger and we will not make it worse. But if we get angry, harsh words come out of us, it will actually stir it up and tempers will flare. See, anger rises when we insist on our rights. Now, you may be within your entitlement to stand up for your rights. That person may have wronged you unjustly, they've wronged you, and you would think, I've got every right to be angry. And you may have every right to be angry because they could have hurt you 100%. But if you can learn to give that over to God, then you will be free of a lot of problems that can come into your life, even when you think you have a right to deserve it. Ephesians 4:26 and 27, Paul says, don't let sin, I'm trying to read out a different version here, don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold for the devil. Now, he's talking in the context of marriage, but this principle applies in any area of your life. If you will keep anger, if you will allow anger to continue to control you and not deal with it every day, he's saying, don't let the sun go down. Before you go to bed, deal with your anger. Get it out of you. Because if you don't, it's like a foothold. The devil gets his claws into you, he gets his feet into your world, and bit by bit, he will take control of your life. So determine not to let anger control you. A couple of things that's worth noting about anger. Firstly, anger is not necessarily sin. Jesus was angry. We see Jesus was angry at the temple. When he cleansed the temple, he wove the cord of the whip and cleansed the temple of all the filth and all the money changers and all the thieves that were there. Jesus was angry when he was at the tomb of Lazarus, and he was angry and moved, and it says he was snorting it. The scripture actually uses the Greek word which means to snort. He was angry at death. So anger is not in and of itself a bad thing. God in the Old Testament is referred to as being angry. He's angry against injustice. And it's okay for us to be angry against injustice, just as God would be. But what determines whether anger becomes sin or not is when we let it control us. When it springs from personal offense. When it springs from the fact that we have somehow been wronged by someone else. Then it can become controlling and destructive in your life. And as we talked about a couple of weeks back, if you will understand that the debt that we owe God is so much greater than any debt that we are owed by someone else, then it helps us to be able to overcome our anger and not have it control us so much. What can you do if you struggle with anger? If you're one of these people and you're listening to this and you think, well, that's me, Rowan, I've got problems with my anger. Well, first one, you need to admit you've got a problem. You need to be open and transparent and humble enough to say, hey, you know what, I struggle with this. And I struggle with this from time to time. It doesn't control me the way it used to, and I've been maturing in my walk with God, but I know it's still there. I know I still have problems with anger, and I have to admit that to myself and to others in my world who can help me and encourage me. Don't live in denial. Face up to it recognize you have a problem, and ask people. If you're unsure if you've got an anger problem, ask the people around you. They'll tell you whether you have an anger problem or not. Second key, you can cultivate a closeness to Jesus. He has experienced the worst treatment possible and was still able to say on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. The more you and I have a relationship with Jesus, the more we imbibe who he is, we can look at Jesus and say, Jesus, you received the worst treatment. And if I was there, I would have been nailing that nail into your hands on the cross. Jesus, you forgave me. Jesus, you looked at me and said, I forgive you. And the more we do that, the more we are able to imbibe his nature and then be able to show that forgiveness to others who've offended us. The third thing is speak to your Connect group leader. Speak to people who you trust in your world, your leaders in your pastoral structure. So your Connect group leader is the first person. Other people maybe that you trust, speak to them and say, I've got a problem with this. Can you help me? I know I have a problem with anger. And they will be able to help you get beyond that and help you grow. And it's not like you're going to be able to click your fingers and anger's going to be gone. This is a process of learning a new behaviour. Fourthly, don't be afraid to get some counselling. A trained counsellor can actually be very helpful in this situation. They can actually help you to learn how to deal with your anger. They can give you strategies to cope with anger. And so don't be afraid to speak to a counsellor. Best if you can speak to a Christian counsellor who understands this teaching. But someone who's trained who can help you is always a good place to go. Do an anger management course if you want. Lots of times you can get into an anger management course. We're not running anything like that here at the church at the moment, but from time to time we may. But you might be able to get along to another group or another support group that does anger management. That can help you too. Fifthly and lastly, learn your trigger points. Get yourself prepared in advance so that you can respond rather than react. We all have certain triggers that will set us off, that kind of set us in the pathway toward getting out of control in our anger. Certain things that happen to us, certain words that people say, certain attitudes, certain challenges that will set us off. And if we can learn to recognize those things, then I often say being forewarned is forearmed. If you're aware of those things, you can learn to channel them and go, oh, I'm not going to go down the path of anger. And long before you get to anger, you can actually get off the pathway and come back to peace. And that comes from learning your trigger points so that you don't automatically get angry. See, what happens is when anger comes, we kind of go into fight or flight mode. And as psychologists have shown, studies of the brain, that when we get angry, what happens is the oxygen drains out of our brain and goes to other parts of our body. And it comes from fight or flight. If you are under threat, then your body wants to fight or run. Both those things require you to have strength. And so when you get angry, that's why you get tense and riled up. But what psychologists have actually shown is that the oxygen leaves the brain, goes there so that you've got the energy to run or fight, but it actually drops your intelligence. So your ability to think rationally actually drops. And so fight or flight might help you in some instances when you're being chased by a wild animal, but it's not necessarily going to help you when you're angry with somebody else. And so you need to learn to calm yourself, recognize those triggers, breathe and allow the oxygen to return to your brain so you can start to think more clearly about this stuff. All right, so we're going to have some discussion now, and let me encourage you to be open and honest. I know that it's a sensitive topic and you may not feel comfortable with everybody in your group, and I get that. But as comfortable as you are, I'd love you to just talk about some questions. We've got some questions like, what makes you angry? Who sets you off? What do you think your trigger points are? What do you think you can do about it? And then let's be gracious toward one another and share and support one another in your group. Don't be judgmental or harsh or criticize. Come with an attitude of saying, I want to help my brother or I want to help my sister, and pray and support one another. And let's give this foothold of anger a big boot out of our lives, because the more we can live at peace with one another, the more successful we'll be, the more at peace we'll be in our life, and the more we'll be able to minister God's love to other people. All right? Happy discussion, and we'll talk to you next time.